Elias Carter's hand trembled as he pressed the short pickaxe against the guard. A gasp escaped the white men, and warm liquid spilled between the enslaved man's fingers. This was the first life Elias had taken. It would not be the last. He wiped the blade on the man's shirt, dragged him behind the gunpowder barrels, and stared at the locomotive that would change everything. Under the February moon of 1853, the Palmetto Express gleamed, a beast of iron and fire carrying death to the south. Tonight, it would carry freedom north, or they would all die in the attempt. Her body swayed in the wind while the masters laughed and drank whiskey, betting on how long she would struggle. Elias, chained to 6 others, was marching from the port to the new plantation that had bought his contract. He did not know the girl. But when her eyes stilled and her tongue hung purple between her lips, something inside him shattered like glass. The forge where he worked stood 50 yards from the port. There, Elias repaired wagon wheels, shod horses, and forged chains. The chains were the worst. Every link he hammered would one day bind black wrists like his own. The overseers loved the irony. "Look at that," they would shout, spitting tobacco in his direction. "The Negro makes his own chains." Elias lowered his head and kept hammering. But at night, on the dirt floor of the barracks, he planned. Every Tuesday at dusk, the Palmetto Express arrived, 6 cars, military locomotive, 2 guards. It carried cotton, gunpowder, muskets, provisions. Before dawn, it departed for Savannah. Elias memorized every detail. He watched the guard shifts change, noted where they smoked their pipes, when they drank. He saw where they kept the cabin keys. He waited. He planned. Then, on the new moon night of February 14th, when the supervisor drank himself unconscious and the younger guard slipped into the bushes to piss, Elias grabbed the knife hidden beneath the forge stones. The guard had no time to scream. The blade entered the side of his neck and tore through his windpipe. Elias felt the body go limp in his arms, hot blood soaking his hands. He dragged the corpse behind the barrels, covered it with canvas, and ran to the locomotive. His hands shook so badly he could barely open the firebox. Inside, red embers pulsed like a demon's heart. He threw in wood, more wood, until the fire roared. The boiler awoke with a metallic groan that echoed through the empty port. Elias smeared grease on his face to hide in the darkness, his heart pounding as if it would burst through his ribs. He had never operated a train. He had only watched, memorizing the engineers' movements when they thought no slave was looking. His hands found the throttle. One pull. The wheels screeched against the rails. Another pull. The Palmetto Express lurched forward like a wounded animal. The whistle, he had forgotten the damn whistle. His hand slammed the lever, and the shriek tore through the night, waking every dog in Charleston. Lights flickered on in the port buildings. Voices shouted. Elias pushed the throttle all the way forward, and the locomotive exploded into the darkness. Iron wheels screamed against iron rails. Sparks flew like fireflies from hell. He did not look back. He could not look back. The landscape became a black blur on both sides, pine trees, swamps, shacks, all melting into shadow. Heat from the firebox scorched his face. His lungs filled with smoke. Every few minutes, he had to shovel more coal, his shoulders burning, blisters rising on his palms. The train consumed fuel like a starving beast. If he stopped feeding it, the boiler would die. If the boiler died, they would catch him. If they caught him, they would skin him alive and hang what remained in the town square as a warning. 20 miles outside Charleston, he heard a noise from the rear cars, a metallic scraping, then voices. His blood froze. Someone was in the cargo cars. Elias grabbed the iron bar he had taken from the forge and moved toward the sound, his bare feet silent on the hot metal floor. He threw open the door to the first car and stopped. 3 pairs of eyes stared back from the darkness, a woman clutching a child, maybe 5 years old, and an old man with white hair and hands gnarled like tree roots. They were black. They were slaves. And they were terrified. "Don't kill us," the woman whispered. Her name, he would learn later, was Ruth. "We hid when they loaded the cotton." "We heard you start the engine." "We thought, maybe." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Elias lowered the iron bar and felt something crack inside his chest. Something that had been frozen since that 12-year-old girl stopped swinging from the rope. He was not alone anymore. This was not just his escape. It was theirs, too. "You know how to run a train?" the old man asked. His voice was rough like sandpaper. His name was Samuel. Before being sold south, he had worked on the railways in Virginia, shoveling coal, cleaning engines, learning machines white men thought blacks too stupid to understand. "Not really," Elias admitted. "Then you better learn fast, son," Samuel said, "because when the sun comes up, every slave catcher from here to Atlanta will be hunting this train." Dawn broke over the Georgia swamps like a wound opening in the sky. Red light filtered through Spanish moss and cypress trees, painting everything the color of old blood. The Palmetto Express roared through marshlands where alligators sunned themselves on mud banks and herons took flight at its approach. Elias and Samuel took turns shoveling coal, their bodies drenched in sweat, muscles screaming. Ruth held her son tight, whispering prayers in his ear, old African words mixed with broken English. The boy's name was Moses. His father had been sold to a sugar plantation in Louisiana 2 years before. Ruth had watched them drag him away in chains, screaming and fighting until the overseers beat him unconscious and threw him into a wagon like a sack of grain. She never saw him again. Moses did not speak anymore. Hadn't spoken since that day. He just stared with eyes too old for his small face. "Savannah's ahead," Samuel said, pointing to smoke rising in the distance. "Big station. Telegraph office. They'll know we're coming." "How?" Elias asked, though he already knew. "Telegraph travels faster than a train, son. They found that guard's body by now. Word's already gone north. Every station between here and Canada knows a Negro stole the Palmetto Express." The words hung in the air like a noose. Canada. It seemed as impossible as the moon. More than 1,000 miles of slave territory, bounty hunters, militias, rivers, mountains. And they had one stolen train running on stolen coal, with no real plan beyond north. "We'll never make it," Ruth said quietly. "We're already dead if we stop," Elias replied. As they approached Savannah, Samuel made them switch to the cargo car. "Too dangerous. We slow down at stations. Inspectors look inside the cabin. They see you driving, they'll shoot you dead before you can blink." He covered them with cotton bales. The 3 fugitives could barely breathe under the weight. Elias heard the train slow, the screech of brakes, voices shouting. Through a gap in the cotton, he saw the station platform, 20 men with rifles, dogs straining at leashes, a telegraph operator running with a paper in his hand, pointing at the locomotive. The engineer who had taken over, a white man named Harris who worked the Savannah route, was arguing with a militia captain. "I'm telling you, nobody boarded in Charleston except the regular crew. The telegram says a Negro killed a guard and stole this train. Then where the hell is he?" The dogs were getting closer. Elias could hear their panting, their claws on wood. Moses started to whimper. Ruth clamped her hand over his mouth, tears streaming down her face. A dog's snout appeared at the edge of the cotton bale, sniffing, drool hanging from its jaws. Elias gripped the iron bar, ready to fight, ready to die. Then a shout from the platform, "Found blood on the coal." Fresh blood. The dogs were pulled away. The militia captain barked orders. "Search every car. He's hiding somewhere." But Samuel had been smart. Before hiding them, he had smeared pig's blood on the coal tender and left a trail leading away from their hiding spot toward the rear cars. The searchers followed it like idiots, tearing through ammunition crates and cotton bales 6 cars back. Meanwhile, Harris got his clearance to depart. The whistle blew, the wheels turned, and the Palmetto Express rolled out of Savannah with 3 fugitives still breathing under the cotton. "Close," Samuel whispered. "Too damn close." They waited an hour before crawling out, lungs burning, bodies cramped. Elias punched through the car wall to the locomotive and found Harris slumped over the controls, a bottle of whiskey in his hand, passed out drunk. Without thinking, Elias strangled him. The men woke choking, thrashing, but Elias did not let go until the body went limp. Another one dead. The count would only grow. He dumped Harris over the side into a ravine and took control of the train again. They were on the Central of Georgia Railway now, heading toward Augusta. The landscape changed from swamps to red clay hills. Pine forests stood thick as walls on both sides. Samuel explained the route. Augusta connects to the Georgia Railroad that goes to Atlanta. From Atlanta, we can take the Western and Atlantic north to Tennessee. But every junction is a death trap. Every station has armed men waiting. What choice do we have? None. That's the problem. Near Augusta, they saw the roadblock. A freight train parked sideways across the tracks. Armed men positioned behind it, rifles aimed at the approaching Palmetto Express. Elias slammed the brakes, but they were moving too fast. The wheels screamed, throwing sparks 6 feet high. They were going to crash. The switch. Samuel yelled, pointing to a junction 50 yards ahead. Change tracks. Elias had no idea how to change tracks while moving. Samuel grabbed the lever outside the cabin, hanging from the side of the locomotive as it barreled toward the roadblock. He threw his weight against the mechanism. Nothing. It was rusted shut. The roadblock loomed closer. 30 yards. 20. Ruth screamed. Samuel pulled harder, veins bulging in his neck. The lever gave way with a crack, and the train lurched violently to the right, switching to the Georgia Railroad line just as bullets tore through the cabin where Elias had been standing seconds before. They left 2 cargo cars behind, uncoupled in the chaos. Elias looked back and saw men swarming over them like ants. But the locomotive was free, racing east now instead of north, buying them time. How much time, he did not know. Where does this go? He shouted over the wind. Atlanta. But it's the long way. We'll hit more towns. More chances to get caught. Or more chances to survive. Night fell again as they pushed toward Atlanta. They passed plantation after plantation, fields of cotton glowing white under the moon like fields of bones. In one place, slaves working late looked up at the passing train, their faces illuminated briefly by the firebox glow. Elias saw recognition in their eyes. They knew. Somehow they knew that train was carrying stolen brothers and sisters. Some raised their hands. Others fell to their knees. Just outside a town called Madison, 2 families appeared from the darkness, running alongside the slowing train. A man, his wife, 3 children, another couple, younger, maybe just married. They grabbed onto the rear car as the locomotive took a curve, pulling themselves up with desperate strength. Elias did not know they were there until he heard Ruth talking to them hours later. 8 fugitives now. 8 souls on a stolen train racing toward death or freedom. The woman from the first family was named Sarah. Burn scars covered her arms where the mistress had punished her for breaking a plate. Her husband, Jacob, bore scars on his back from the whip, so many they overlapped like a map of pain. Their children were 6, 8, and 10. The 8-year-old girl had never worn shoes, her feet were covered in calluses and cuts. The younger couple, Thomas and Abigail, had escaped the night before their forced separation. The master planned to sell Thomas to a mine in Alabama. Abigail would stay to work the fields. They would never see each other again. So they ran. They hid in the woods. They heard the train coming and saw their only chance. How far to Atlanta? Jacob asked. Maybe 4 hours, Samuel guessed. They'll be waiting. I know. Atlanta rose from the red hills like a city of fire. Furnaces and factories belched smoke into the night sky. The Western and Atlantic Railroad station sat in the center, a fortress of brick and iron surrounded by warehouses and military depots. Elias slowed the train to a crawl as they approached, knowing they could not just barrel through. They needed coal, water, and a plan. There, Ruth pointed to a boarding house on the edge of the rail yard. A single lamp burned in the window. Red glass. That's a sign. Sign of what? Abolitionists. Free blacks who help runaways. My grandmother told me about the red lamp. It means sanctuary. They had no choice but to trust her. Elias stopped the train behind a warehouse, out of sight from the main station. They moved in darkness, 8 adults and 4 children, shadows slipping between buildings. The boarding house door opened before they knocked. A white woman stood there, maybe 50, gray hair pulled back, eyes hard as stone. "Margaret Hensley," she said. "Get inside. Now." The house smelled of lye soap and old wood. Margaret bolted the door and pulled curtains over every window. She laid out bread, cheese, cold chicken. The fugitives ate like animals, hands shaking, food falling from their mouths. The children cried silently, overwhelmed. "You've brought hell down on this city," Margaret said. But her voice was not angry. Just tired. "Every slave catcher in Georgia is hunting you. They're offering $5,000 for a Negro who stole a military train." "We need coal," Elias said. "Water. Enough to reach Tennessee." "You won't make it to Tennessee. They've blocked every route north." "Then we'll die trying." Margaret studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "There's a freight train leaving at midnight. Western and Atlantic, goes to Chattanooga. It carries supplies for the war effort, mostly ammunition and medical supplies. I can get you on it, hidden in crates. But you'll have to leave your locomotive behind." "No," Elias surprised himself with his firmness. "That train is ours. We took it. We're riding it all the way. That's suicide. We're already dead. At least this way we die free." Margaret gave them coal, charcoal for darkening their faces, maps showing routes north. While she worked, her hands moved with practiced efficiency. Elias realized she had done this before. Many times. How many slaves had passed through this red lamp? How many had made it? How many had died? The answer came sooner than he wanted. Soldiers surrounded the house an hour before midnight. Someone had talked, or someone had seen. It did not matter. Boots kicked in the door. Lanterns flooded the rooms. Margaret stood between the soldiers and the fugitives, a small woman facing armed men. "You're harboring stolen property. They're human beings. They're slaves. Step aside." "No," he hit her. The rifle but caught her across the face, and she went down hard, blood pouring from her broken nose. Elias lunged, but Samuel grabbed him. "Not yet," the old man hissed. "Wait." They arrested Margaret first, dragging her away as she screamed at them to let the children go. Then the soldiers came for the fugitives. But Samuel had seen this coming. While the captain dealt with Margaret, he had led everyone out the back through a root cellar into a tunnel that connected to the rail yard, Margaret's final gift, a way out she had built over years. They emerged behind the Western and Atlantic locomotive, a massive engine twice the size of the Palmetto Express. The engineer was checking the wheels, his back turned. Elias picked up a rock and crushed his skull before the men could turn around. 3 dead. The number had become meaningless. They packed into the cargo cars, hiding among crates marked medical supplies and ammunition. But when Elias opened one, he found something else. Coffins. 20 wooden coffins, each containing a body wrapped in canvas, soldiers who had died from typhoid fever in the camps up north, being shipped home for burial. "Get in," he told the others. "You want us to hide with corpses?" Jacob's voice shook. "You want to live?" They climbed into the coffins with the dead, lying beside cold bodies that stank of decay and embalming fluid. Ruth held Moses in a coffin with a young soldier who looked almost peaceful, as if sleeping. Elias shared his with a man whose face had rotted away, leaving only grinning teeth and empty eye sockets. The lid closed. Darkness swallowed him. He heard nails being hammered shut. The train pulled out of Atlanta at midnight, heading north into the mountains. Inside the coffins, the fugitives barely breathed. The stench was suffocating. Moses vomited on his mother's chest but did not make a sound. Hours passed like years. The train climbed through tunnels carved into rock, the wheels echoing in the darkness like heartbeats. Then movement outside. Voices. The train had stopped somewhere in the mountains. Soldiers were inspecting the cargo. "Open them," someone ordered. "Sir, these are fever victims. Highly contagious." "I don't care." "Open them." Nails were pried loose. Light flooded in. Elias held his breath, pressed against the rotting corpse, willing himself to be dead. A soldier's face appeared above him, young, maybe 19, scared. He looked at Elias, looked at the corpse, started to close the lid. Then the corpse's arm fell across Elias's chest. Old blood, nearly black, leaked from the canvas wrapping. The soldier stumbled back, gagging. "They're leaking. The bodies are leaking. Seal them. Seal them all. I'm not catching fever." The lid slammed shut, nails hammered, and the train rolled on. Inside the coffin, Elias started laughing. He couldn't help it. They had hidden with the dead and become invisible. The dead had saved them. They emerged in Chattanooga 12 hours later, climbing from the coffins like ghosts, faces gray with shock and trauma. But they were alive. Tennessee. They had crossed into Tennessee. One step closer to freedom. The Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad ran northwest through valleys where fog clung to the ground like cotton. Samuel took over driving now. Elias's hands were shaking too badly. The old man seemed made of iron, never tiring, never stopping. He pushed the locomotive harder than Elias had dared, the boiler temperature climbing into dangerous levels. "We're going to blow up," Elias said. "Or we're going to make it." Only two options left. Near Nashville, they encountered the Cumberland River, a wide, brown snake of water cutting through the hills. The railroad bridge was guarded. Soldiers on both sides, a checkpoint at the far end. No way through there. Thomas pointed to a riverside dock where flatboats were tied up. "We take the river." They abandoned the locomotive for the first time since Charleston, setting it to run unmanned down the tracks while they escaped on stolen boats. Elias watched the Palmetto Express disappear into the distance, still pulling its ghost train of coffins and ammunition, and felt something like grief. That locomotive had carried them 500 miles. It had become their salvation, their identity. The slave who stole the train. Now it was gone. The Cumberland River ran fast and cold. They paddled through darkness, following the North Star, staying close to the bank. Behind them, they heard explosions. The unmanned locomotive had hit something, maybe the checkpoint, maybe another train. The night lit up with orange fire. "Samuel," Elias called back to the old man in the other boat. But Samuel was not in the boat. He was in the water, his head barely above the surface, being pulled down by the current. A bullet had hit him during their escape from the train. He had said nothing, just kept rowing until his strength gave out. Now he was drowning. Elias dove in. The water was freezing, stealing his breath, pulling him under. He grabbed Samuel's shirt and dragged him toward the bank, but the old man was too heavy, the current too strong. They were both going under. "Let me go," Samuel gasped. "Save yourself." "No, boy, you got 8 people depending on you. Don't die for an old man." I said no. But the river decided. A submerged log hit them both, separating them. Elias grabbed onto it, fighting to keep his head above water. Samuel went under. Came up once, coughing blood. Went under again. Did not come back up. They buried him on the riverbank at dawn, digging with bare hands, piling rocks to mark the grave. Elias did not know any prayers, so he just said what he felt. "You brought us 500 miles. We'll take the rest for you. We'll make it to Canada. I swear on your grave, old man. We'll make it." But he was lying. He knew he was lying because when he looked at the others, at Ruth and Moses, at Sarah's exhausted children, at Jacob's infected feet, he saw death. They were not going to make it. They were going to die somewhere between here and freedom, their bodies thrown in unmarked graves, their names forgotten. Elias, Ruth said quietly. Look. A white couple stood on the opposite bank. The men wore simple Quaker clothing, black coat and hat. The woman held a lantern even though it was daylight. They did not speak, just nodded once and gestured for the fugitives to follow. The Quakers led them to a farm hidden in the hills, where 20 other escaped slaves waited in a barn, old men, young women, children who had walked hundreds of miles with bleeding feet. They were all heading north on the Underground Railroad, the secret network of safe houses and guides that moved slaves from bondage to freedom. Louisville is 3 days' walk, the Quakerman said. His name was Josiah. From there you cross the Ohio River. The other side is Indiana, free soil. But the river is watched. Slave catchers on every dock. You'll need to cross at night, probably in winter floods. Many don't make it. How many? Elias asked. Josiah did not answer directly, just said, more than half of those who try to cross the Ohio don't reach the other side. They joined a group of 12 others for the walk to Louisville. 20 people moving through forests and fields, hiding during the day, traveling at night. Kentucky was a border state, slavery legal, but with pockets of abolitionists. Every white face could be friend or enemy. Trust no one. Suspect everyone. On the second night, they passed a plantation where a woman was being whipped in the yard. Her screams followed them for miles. None of the fugitives spoke. They just walked faster. Louisville appeared through winter fog like a phantom city. The Ohio River flowed dark and wide beyond it, the far shore barely visible. Indiana. Freedom. So close Elias could almost taste it. But between them and that shore was half a mile of icy water, strong current, and armed patrols. We cross tonight, Josiah said. There's a ferryman. He'll take you for everything you have, money, clothes, whatever. But he'll get you across. What if we have nothing? Jacob asked. Then you swim. But there was no ferryman. They reached the designated spot at midnight and found only an empty dock and a rowboat with a hole in the bottom. A trap. Josiah realized it first, started to shout a warning, but then the torches appeared on all sides. Slave catchers, maybe 20 of them, surrounding the fugitives like wolves around sheep. We've been expecting you, the leader said. He was missing teeth, his breath visible in the cold. Word came down from Atlanta about a Negro who killed 3 white men and stole a train. That wouldn't be you, would it, boy? Elias did not answer. He saw Ruth pulling Moses behind her. Saw Sarah covering her children. Saw Abigail gripping Thomas's hand so hard her knuckles were white. 20 fugitives. 20 slave catchers. No weapons except rocks and desperation. Take them, the leader said. The fight lasted maybe 2 minutes. The fugitives threw rocks, used fists, teeth. Jacob managed to gouge out one catcher's eye before being clubbed to the ground. Thomas broke another's arm. Ruth bit a chunk from a man's face. But they were unarmed and exhausted, fighting people with clubs and rifles. One by one, they fell. Elias fought 3 men at once, his iron bar swinging, crushing ribs and jaws. But then a shot rang out. Pain exploded in his shoulder. He went down, blood pouring from the wound. The slave catchers tied them all with ropes, binding hands and feet. We'll hang half of you in Louisville as a warning, the leader said. The other half goes back to your masters. Let them decide your punishment. But then, from the river, a voice, I don't think so. A black man stepped from a rowboat, a pistol in each hand. Behind him, 3 more boats, each carrying armed free blacks from the Indiana side. They had been waiting, watching. Now they came. The gunfight lit up the night. The slave catchers scattered, some shot, some drowning as they tried to swim away. The rescuers cut the ropes binding the fugitives and dragged them to the boats. Elias barely remembered the crossing. He was losing blood, consciousness fading. He felt the boat rock, felt hands pulling him. Then his feet touched solid ground, and someone said, "Welcome to Indiana. You're free." He collapsed on the shore, snow falling on his face, and passed out. He woke 3 days later in a basement in a town called Jeffersonville. A white doctor had removed the bullet from his shoulder, stitched the wound with horsehair thread. It would scar badly. Elias did not care about scars anymore. He had so many they had become his skin. The others, he asked. Alive. Most of them. Jacob died from his wounds yesterday. Sarah's youngest has pneumonia, but will probably survive. The rest are upstairs. Jacob, the man with the whip-scarred back who had fought with his last breath to protect his family. Elias had not even known his last name. Would never know. Just another body in an unmarked grave. But 19 had survived. 19 out of 20 who had left Louisville. And more were joining them. Word of the stolen train had spread through the Underground Railroad like fire. Elias the fugitive had become Elias the legend. Slaves were escaping their plantations just to join his group, hoping some of his luck would rub off on them. By the time they reached Cincinnati a week later, their group had grown to 30 people. The city was a major hub of the railroad, with dozens of safe houses and hundreds of abolitionists. They hid in the basement of a church while a reverend named Parker coordinated their next move. "Cleveland is 200 miles north," Parker explained, pointing to a map. "From there, you can take boats across Lake Erie to Canada. But you'll be traveling through Ohio, and the law here is complicated. Technically a free state, but the Fugitive Slave Act means catchers can come here legally. You're not truly safe until you cross the border." "How long to Cleveland?" Elias asked. 2 weeks on foot. Maybe less if we can get you on freight trains." They traveled in groups of 5 and 6, scattered across different routes to avoid detection. Elias led one group that included Ruth, Moses, and 8 others. They moved mostly at night, following the North Star, sleeping in barns and caves. Near Columbus, a farmer let them hide in his loft. His son brought them bread and rabbit stew. When they thanked him, the boy said, "My father was a slave. Bought his freedom 30 years ago. He says every slave he helps is payment on a debt." But not everyone was friendly. Near Sandusky, a mob attacked their group in broad daylight, throwing rocks and bottles. "Go back south, niggers," they screamed. Moses was hit in the head by a rock and went down bleeding. Ruth threw herself over him, taking the blows meant for her son. A local sheriff finally broke it up, but he was not interested in helping, just told them to leave town before sundown or he'd arrest them all. Cleveland rose from the shore of Lake Erie like a city made of smoke and iron. It was March now, nearly a month since Charleston. Ice floes drifted on the lake's gray surface. The Canadian shore was 20 miles away, invisible in the mist. "We've arranged passage," Parker's local contact said. His name was Lewis, a free black man who had escaped Kentucky 15 years earlier. 3 boats. $40 per person. "We don't have $40, Elias said. "Then you have a problem." They spent a week in Cleveland hiding in a warehouse while Lewis tried to negotiate lower prices. Meanwhile, more fugitives arrived every day. The warehouse became packed with desperate people, all trying to scrape together money for the crossing. Some sold their shoes. Others sold their clothes. One woman sold her hair. Finally, a sympathetic ship captain agreed to take them for $20 each. They pooled everything they had. It was not enough. They were $200 short. Elias stared at the pile of coins and felt defeat crushing him. They had come so far, more than 1,000 miles. And they would fail here, 20 miles from freedom, because of money. "Take me," he said to Lewis. "Just me. Use my 20 for someone else. I'll stay behind and work, save up, cross later." "Don't be stupid," Ruth said. "We all go or none of us go." "How?" "We're 200 short." She reached into her dress and pulled out a locket. Inside was a curl of her dead husband's hair and a small emerald, maybe worth $300. She had carried it for 2 years, through beatings and escapes and rivers and coffins, her last piece of her husband. "Take it," she said, pressing it into Lewis's hand. The boats left Cleveland at midnight on March 18, 1853. 3 fishing vessels, each packed with fugitives, crossing Lake Erie in darkness. The water was rough, waves 4 feet high, ice everywhere. Elias held onto the rail and threw up over the side. He had survived bullet wounds, slave catchers, rivers, and dogs, but he could not handle boats. Halfway across, the lead boat hit an ice floe and split its hull. People spilled into the freezing water, screaming. The other boats tried to help, but the current pulled the victims away. Elias watched a man go under, his hand reaching up one last time before disappearing. He counted 12 people drowned before his boat moved on. 12 more bodies for unmarked graves. Ruth stood at the rail beside him, Moses in her arms. The boy had his face buried in his mother's chest. "Almost there," she whispered. "Almost free." Then the ice beneath their boat cracked. Not an ice floe, an ice shelf. They had strayed too far north into shallow water where the lake had frozen solid. The boat lurched, tilted. Elias grabbed Ruth's arm, but she was holding Moses and could not hold onto the rail. She fell. The water was so cold it stopped his heart. Elias dove in without thinking, his wounded shoulder screaming. The current pulled Ruth down, pulled Moses away from her. She had to choose, save herself or save her son. She chose Moses. Pushed him up toward Elias's reaching hands. Elias grabbed the boy and kicked for the surface, broke through, gasping. Ruth did not come up. He treaded water, holding Moses above the waves, screaming her name. Other hands pulled them into the boat. He tried to dive again, but they held him back. "She's gone," someone said. "She's gone." Moses did not cry. He just stared at the water where his mother had disappeared and did not make a sound. The Canadian shore appeared through dawn mist like a promised land rising from the sea. The boats ground against frozen sand, and the fugitives stumbled out, falling to their knees, kissing the ground. Some prayed. Some wept. Elias just stood there holding Moses, both of them shivering, both of them silent. A group of black men and women waited on the shore, former slaves who had made this same crossing. They wrapped the new arrivals in blankets, gave them hot soup, led them to a settlement called Wilberforce Colony. It was a community of free blacks farming and building homes in the wilderness north of Toronto. They had schools, churches, their own government, a place where being black did not mean being property. "You made it," someone told Elias. "You're free." But he did not feel free. He felt empty. 23 people had died getting him here. The guard in Charleston. The engineer in Savannah. Harris. Samuel. Jacob. Ruth. 12 drowned in the lake. Others whose names he never learned. 23 ghosts following him into freedom. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in his life, he heard a train whistle in the distance, some freight line heading south with lumber and grain. He wondered if anyone in the South still talked about the Palmetto Express, about the slave who stole a military train and rode it 1,000 miles to freedom. Probably not. Probably they had forgotten already, moved on to new atrocities, new horrors. The world kept turning. Slaves kept dying. The only difference was that 27 people who should have died in chains died free instead. And 36 made it all the way to Canada. Moses fell asleep in Elias's arms, his small body trembling from nightmares Elias could not see. He stroked the boy's hair and whispered a promise he intended to keep. "Your mother didn't die so you could be scared. She died so you could be free. So live free. Live for both of you." In the morning, Elias would start building a cabin on land the Wilberforce colony gave him. He would raise Moses as his own son. He would work as a blacksmith again, but this time forging tools for farmers instead of chains for slaves. He would marry eventually, have children who never knew bondage. He would grow old watching trains pass in the distance and remember the night he became a thief, a murderer, and a freeman all at once. But that morning was still hours away.